Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you here today with an article from The Federalist dated January 30th, and it is entitled, If the United Nations Were a Country, Israel Would Have to Declare War on It. And I thought this would be a pretty interesting read. Skimmed the first part of it. I haven't read this whole article, so we're going to go through it together here. So the subheading says the UN spent decades attacking Israel. Its employees simply took the next logical step. And I want to say that this article is in the wake of the UNRWA. We're going to see what that stands for. UNWRA. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's that bunch of people who work for the UN who turns out were actually aiding the Hamas terrorists on October 7th. So good job, UN. And the UN has also had a hate bone for Israel for, as the author said here in his heading, decades. So let's go ahead and see what he says is in 1975, on the 37th anniversary of Kristallnacht, if you don't know what that is, go look it up. It says the UN General Assembly adopted a Soviet-led resolution equating Zionism, or the idea of a Jewish homeland, with racism. Yes, because nothing says racism like Jews just wanting to have their own homeland. That's literally all Zionism is. The end. Okay. So if you believe it's anything other than that, well, you've been misinformed. So sure, the world would see genocides, man-made famines, violent repression of ethnic minorities, authoritarian regimes, terror states, theocratic revolutions, juntas, concentration camps, and communist despotism over the next 4+ decades. But this international parliament of depraved totalitarians and extremists would never lose focus. Since 1975, the UN has condemned Israel, the only free nation in the Middle East, more than any other in the world. Many years, in fact, the tiny country has been targeted with more resolutions than all others combined. And I was just thinking that when he wrote that in that article, I saw that there. I was like, I think they've been had more resolutions against them than all the other nations combined. So I'm glad that confirmed what I was thinking. It says, in addition to emboldening and legitimizing Israel's enemies, including the pioneer of modern terrorism, the UN has also adopted an Arab myth in its effort to erase Jewish identity. We're famous in a UNESCO resolution denying Jews any historical connection to their faith's holiest sites at the Temple Mount and Western Wall, a contention that should come as a surprise to anyone who's read a book. The motion was supported by 24 nations, including Security Council members Russia and China, and only 6 countries opposed it. Well, thank you to those 6. So then there was the United Nations Human Rights Council, whose mission is purportedly to protect human rights around the world. They don't seem to do a very good job of that. It says Donald Trump pulled funding and refused to allow the U.S. to participate in these third world Jew-hating bull sessions, and he would have been right to do that. In fact, I'll even go a step further and say we should just pull our funding from the UN altogether. Just call it a day and tell them to get the hell off of our property because they're in New York. So get out of this. Says when Joe Biden became president, he rejoined the council. He did so on the same day as Eritrea, which usually ranks below North Korea in those freedom indexes, just to give you an idea of the quality of the membership. Says this year, the sickening first is led by Morocco. Members include Cuba and China. Oh, yeah, so we're doing great on the United Nations Human Rights Council. So let's see here. So it's Eritrea, Morocco, Cuba, China. Okay, so all places that don't actually know what human rights are. All right. I think one other country is still down there too. I think it's 5. So I don't know what the other country is, but if these 4 are any indication, it's probably not a good one. So still, as reprehensible as all this history is, no one in any of those agencies, as far as we know, has actively participated in the killing of Jews. One can no longer say the same for the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. That's the UNRWA. I guess that's how you pronounce it. UNRWA. UNRWA? We'll just call it that. Another agency Biden rejoined when becoming president. So Joe Biden is just full of making good choices, isn't he? Because we now know that at least 12 of UNRWA's employees took part in the Hamas massacre of Jews on October 7th, not merely offering logistical help or coordination, but sometimes participating in the actual kidnapping and murdering of civilians. As of this writing, the UN fired 9 of its employees, which seems like a small price to pay for Maria. I think that's like a vast undercount. Like there should be hundreds, if not like thousands, that should be fired if that's what was happening. It says the US, Britain, Germany, and Australia, among others, have temporarily paused funding to UNRWA, which has been a major tool for funneling international money to Hamas. Well, good on you guys. As progressives naturally were aghast, not at the UN's role in the massacre, but at the funding freeze. Because among that organization of 13,000 UN aid workers, risking the starvation of millions over grave allegations of 12 is indefensible, AOC explained, and she might actually be the last human being on the face of the earth that I'd listen to about anything at all. So yeah. Says, oh, and only 12 people employed by the United Nations participated in the murder, rape, and kidnapping of Jewish women and children, you say? Seems like a lot to me, actually. Yeah, one would have been enough to me. Says, indeed, Israel provided the U.S. with intelligence proving around 1,200, and that was the number I was thinking of, was 1,200, or around about 10% of the UN employees in Gaza have direct links to Hamas or Islamic Jihad. Nearly half of UNRWA's employees are close relatives of members of various terrorist groups. That's a lot. Says when UN Watch translated 249,000 user posts in the UNRWA chat group right after the terror attack, thousands of them praised Hamas. It says, may Allah keep their feet steady and guide their aim. It says most of those excited by the news were likely teachers, and that is vital to remember. So, okay, so teachers around the world are just pieces of crap, not just in the US. All right, cool. This is whatever the number, however, please share us the argument, or please spare us the argument I can read that the agency bears no responsibility for the actions of its employees. Israel has long warned the UN that the UN was aiding and abetting Hamas, and UNRWA knew what was going on. We have known for decades that the agency employs members of Islamic terror organizations, and that's just the start. You can see that there's links there to some articles that you can go check out as well that will prove them. It created as a temporary agency after the Israelis won their independence in 1949. UNRWA was tasked with providing social services and education for those refugee camps in Arab nations. It says the number of refugees that supposedly fled from Israel after the Jews was less than 700,000. More than 70 years later, there are allegedly 5.9 million Arab refugees. Yeah, that supposed genocide that Israel is doing over there, it's not going too well, is it? Their population, what is that, has gone up by over 8 times. So there you go. When Palestinians were living under Jordanian, Syrian, Egyptian, and Lebanese control, not one of those nations attempted to create a new state. No one integrated those fleeing a war they started. Palestinians were kept in camps, often underwritten by the UN, in an effort to create an intractable situation for Israel and a convenient issue to exploit. Yeah, I mean, like, you would think, like, at some point, I guess what refugee status is just a hereditary thing for them. Like, what? Like, can't you, like, at some point not live in a tent? Like, go do something, man. Because Israel, incidentally, accepted around the same number of refugees after 1948, most of them expelled from their ancestral homes throughout the Islamic world. Until 1952, the UNRWA also helped Jewish and Arab refugees within Israel. That was a long time ago. There are no refugee camps in Israel anymore, not for those who come from Iran or Iraq or Morocco or Kenya or Ethiopia or Russia or anywhere else. The UNRWA, tasked with running schools, has not only propped up terror groups on Israel's border, but has educated successive generations of Arabs, including Jews and the West, in believing in the fantastical right of return. The UN not only continues to foster the false hope that Arabs will rule a Judenfrei West Bank and Jerusalem, but that refugees will one day return to Israel proper. And by the way, Judenfrei means like without Jews. It says the return of nearly 6 million refugees would mean the end of Israel. Correct. It says, which that's the point. It says this fantasy has helped scuttle virtually every attempted peace deal. Tens of millions of people around the world have been victims of major conflicts in the world since the Arab world first failed to destroy Israel. And they've tried many times, and it just hasn't worked. So it's not going to work now. Because over those years, Palestinians have been mired in a self inflicted quagmire of poverty and war, while the UN has helped perpetuate the victimhood and extremism. It's no surprise some of its employees finally decided to take the next logical step. Yeah, so this article is more about like, UN employees, who are supposed to remain impartial and supposed to be helping, basically siding with one side in the conflict, and there's actual proof of it. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.